Good afternoon. Welcome all to Naples United Church of Christ. My name is Mark Williams, and I serve as the senior minister here. And I want to begin by thanking two wonderful community organizations, Greater Naples Leadership and the Collier Community Foundation, who have partnered with our church to help make today's forum possible. Will you all join me in thanking them? No, we cannot stop hurricanes, but we can change how we prepare and respond as individuals and as a community to help build our environmental and community resilience. My faith teaches me that as the pastor of a church that is in and for the community, I must take very seriously what the Apostle Paul referred to as the common good. It is in that spirit of collectively working toward the common good that I welcome Donna Messer, who is president of Greater Naples Leadership.
Thank you so much, Reverend Williams. Hello, everyone. I'm Donna Messer, president of Greater Naples Leadership, and we are so happy to be back here at NUCC for our third annual community forum, this time partnering with the Collier Community Foundation on hurricane resilience. Our goal today is to help you learn, prepare, and empower yourselves to adapt and recover from severe storms. For those of you who don't know GNL, that's what we do for our members: educate and inspire a network of service-minded leaders to impact positive change in our community. GNL is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. Since the mid-1990s, we have been educating our members on the needs in Collier County through an in-depth master's program, as well as connecting them to nonprofit and civic volunteer opportunities. We also make a meaningful difference on important issues in Collier County through forums like these. For me, recent hurricanes have not only caused physical damage to our property, but a growing dread to future storms. We hope that you leave this event with some practical information on how we can be stronger and more prepared to face whatever Mother Nature sends our way. Now I'd like to introduce our moderator, Eileen Connolly Kiesler, who has been president and CEO of the Collier Community Foundation since 2013, where she oversees the foundation's mission and addresses community needs by providing leadership and coordination through grant making and fund development. Since joining the Collier Community Foundation, assets have grown from $62 million to over $334 million. The Collier Community Foundation, founded in 1995, is now celebrating its 40th anniversary. They manage over 900 funds, collaborate with hundreds of nonprofits, and have given over $362 million to transform lives, providing grants for housing, environmental resiliency, human services, education, the arts, healthcare, and disaster relief. $32.7 million in the 2024 fiscal year alone. Please join me in welcoming Eileen.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Eileen Connolly Kiesler, and we think this is a really important day talking about hurricane resilience. And it's great to see so many of you here today who are passionate about preserving our community. At the Community Foundation, we feel this forum is a vital key to one of the focuses on our disaster relief. Since 2017, when we first activated the Collier Comes Together Fund, we've raised over $13.9 million for disasters such as Hurricane Irma and Ian, COVID-19, red tide, and the wildfires. The Collier Community Foundation is taking a leadership role in building future resiliency by spearheading the elevation of homes and replacing manufactured homes lost to storm damage or destruction by Hurricane Ian in Everglades City, Chokoloskee, Plantation Island, and in River Park. Several homes are now safe from future flooding, and thanks to funding from the State of Florida Department of Commerce. In our forum today, you'll learn why building hurricane resilience is essential for protecting our homes, businesses, and coastal lifestyle. Our expert speakers, Matt Devitt, Dr. Jennifer Geraldo, and Dan Summers will share critical insight from understanding hurricane formation and coastal risk factors to practical strategies and community projects that enhance our preparedness. We'll show you a video highlighting the city, county, and the Naples Botanical Gardens resilience efforts, followed by question and answer period for your questions to our panelists. This event is calling to action all of us who have come together to learn and strengthen our collective resilience in the face of increasing storms. So you have these yellow cards in the pews, so feel free to ask questions of any one of our panelists or general. There are going to be people walking around to pick them up throughout this entire panel discussion. So again, when you think of something, write it down. We invite you to stop at our tables on the way out to learn more about how our community partners with addressing resilience. We thank to all the organizations here today for their efforts in building a safer, more resilient future for Collier County. You'll see their names on the screen. And I'd like to kick things off today by introducing our presenters. At the conclusion, again, we'll be taking questions from the audience. And again, those cards are there. Feel free, you're probably going to hear that after every speaker. The cards are there. Feel free to fill them out. And volunteers, again, will be collecting them. So our first presenter, Chief Meteorologist Matt Devitt, Southwest Florida's most trusted meteorologist, has guided our community through hurricanes like Irma and Ian with calm and factual reporting. And I watch him, and he's always like, just stay calm, be prepared and stay calm. The Florida native and Penn State graduate, Matt began his career in Tornado Alley before joining Wink News in 2016. Now heading the Weather Authority Department, he mentors a team of meteorologists and actively serves the community through outreach programs. Driven by a long life passion for meteorology, Matt's goals will always be to look out for his viewers the same way he looks out for his own family. So please welcome Matt Devitt. You bet. I got to ask a question about the little yellow thing.
Yeah.
So as we were watching the news last night and they started talking about what's in the Atlantic and this little yellow bubble, I was like, wow. Yeah, he just said it went poof, so you can all relax.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, I saw that develop yesterday. I said, come on, man, it's March. Like, enough of that. Thank you so much for having me, and I really appreciate it. One of the main goals here that I'm going to talk about over the next 15 to 20 minutes is how we can better prepare for years to come. And yes, I was the guy that you probably saw too much of last year during 3 storm surge events from Debbie, Helene, and Milton. But why I am so encouraged to see everybody right now is you guys are doing the right thing. The time to prepare for storms is not as it's approaching. The time to do it is on sunny, beautiful days well ahead of tropical systems. So the fact of where we live, I wish I could change this, but I can't. We have been hit with storms in the past, and it is inevitable that we will continue to be hit. If you don't believe me, let me show you this first graphic. This is how many times Collier County has been hit since 1850. It looks like a bowl of spaghetti, right? These are all the tracks. The various colors are the intensities: tropical storm, Cat 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now let's kind of filter out the tropical storms and let's get to our biggest storms that we've had in Collier County history. Next graphic. Take you all the way back to 1960, a major hurricane called Donna. In my opinion, this one was even a notch stronger than Irma in 2017. It packed a punch. We had storm surge up to 12 feet in Naples from this storm. Next graphic. Now, what's amazing is we went through a stretch from 1960 to 2004, 44 years without a major hurricane landfall. Now, that doesn't mean that we didn't get brushed from significant storms. And granted, we avoided Cat 5 Hurricane Andrew, the core of it, but I still had wind gusts well over 100 miles an hour in southern areas of coastal Collier County. So that was Andrew. Now we're going to fast forward all the way to Wilma. Can you believe, for those who have been here for 20 years, Wilma was 20 years ago. 2005, and this one was huge. It was fast moving, Category 3, Cape Romano. Here are some more specifics on our next graphic of what Wilma did in southwest Florida. Landfall intensity 120. I did have a storm surge of 8 feet in Collier County. Highest gust was 135 miles an hour for Marco Island as well as Everglades City, and this storm was hauling it. Fast moving, 23 miles an hour. For a reference here, Ian was moving at about 9 to 10 miles an hour. So Wilma was twice as fast. Next graphic. Now we're going to take you to, just to kind of put in perspective how big Wilma was, these are the wind fields of Charley, smallest, Ian, Irma, and then Wilma. And for those in the back, the yellow is tropical storm force wind, the red is hurricane force wind. So Wilma, she was a big one. I think that's the only time you can ever say that with tropical systems, but it was a big storm. And I want to show you the next one coming up with Irma. In 2017, I had people that were without power for upwards of 2 to 3 weeks around Golden Gate Estates all the way towards Lehigh Acres. Thankfully, Irma did not slam us as at its maximum intensity as a Category 5, but still those impacts were felt along our coast. Next graphic. Believe it or not, we have never had a Category 5 made landfall in Southwest Florida. We've never had that. Now, I know what you're thinking, but Ian was not a Cat 5 at landfall. Now, Ian was a Category 5 offshore, and what happened was the pressure started to go up. There was some slight weakening, but the problem is Ian still possessed Category 5 characteristics as it made landfall. So the upper Cat 4, it's just really a technicality. Doesn't matter if it's a Cat 4 or 5, it made a significant catastrophic impact on our community. Now, we've had 2 Category 5s get close to our coast, and the most impactful and strongest hurricane to ever impact the United States, it was back in 1935. We call it the Labor Day hurricane, decimated the Keys, got close to Marco Island, and you can see that reflected on the bottom hand portion of your screen. So we have never technically had a Cat 5 at landfall, but boy, Ian sure got close, and it was a storm that we'll never forget. Next graphic. So oftentimes what will happen is, there's so many impacts from hurricanes, both before, during, and after. And this has happened over the past couple of weeks and the months. Now, thankfully, we have seen improvement as of late, but in a nutshell, what happens is, and I'll use last year as an example, we had a very active rainy season. Then we had rain from Debbie, Helene, and Milton. So all that water caused what was happening inland, fertilizers from farming, all that stuff got washed into the Gulf, and that served as breeding ground for red tide. We had that after this past hurricane season, and guess what happened in 2018 after we had Irma? It happened again. So it's not a coincidence. Long story short, these wet tropical systems with excess rainfall and flooding flushes out the nutrients that serve as the breeding ground for red tide into the Gulf of Mexico. Next graphic. So how do we create hurricanes and where do they come from? Well, the answer, as we know, it's Africa. Now, we know that tropical waves oftentimes will come from Africa, but why? What's with Africa? Why does it come from there? Well, let me kind of talk about the basics. So the reason why it occurs in Africa has to do with a battle of dry air as well as humid air, as well as differences in temperature. Next graphic. Consequently, a jet stream will start to develop with this contrast in temperature and humidity. Then from there, next graphic, you will start to have wobbles in this jet stream. And what that can lead to is converging air. Well, when the air converges, can't go down into the ground, so it lifts, cools, condenses, and starts to form thunderstorms. Next graphic. So that will start to consolidate into a tropical wave as it leaves Africa and heads into the Atlantic, where, as we know, depending on the time of the year, next graphic, the warm waters will start to allow an area of lower pressure to form and become better organized. And we know what happens after that with our next graphic. You will start to see a tropical depression, tropical storm, or yes, even a hurricane develop. Now, from there, and this is, I can't stress enough, I don't think sometimes we realize how much our weather is dominated by this, our next graphic. It's called the Bermuda High, Dome of High Pressure. This oftentimes will steer tropical systems. When it is weak, when that high is weak, that is oftentimes when you will see hurricanes curve north in the Atlantic. That's what we like. We don't like when it's stronger. And for example, Irma is a byproduct of when we had a high that was stronger. It caused Irma to go more west. And oftentimes, when we have that stronger high, we are more susceptible to hurricane landfalls. Do you guys remember, it was not this past rainy season, but it was the rainy season before that was particularly dry in Naples? What happened was that high was weaker. Our winds started to, as a result, come in from the Gulf and from the southwest. That blew the better rain chances and the greater rainfall to Miami and Fort Lauderdale, and as a result, they had one of their wettest seasons on record. So that high, believe it or not, controls a lot of our weather. Next graphic. Okay, so it is an undeniable fact that we're getting warmer. We are. Now, where it gets political, and I don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole, is why. So I'm just here to talk about the stats of that we are getting warmer. We are. In the water, the land. Here's a look at the past 100 years, and the Atlantic is getting warmer. Here's a look geographically with our next graphic, and you can see that across the world. In the Pacific, the Atlantic, the Indian Ocean, as well as the Pacific. Now, one of the things I don't want you to necessarily get misled by is that, yes, warmer water temperatures in theory mean that you're going to have more power and energy for stronger storms and more storms. But that's not the only thing that makes hurricanes. You have to have this, I call it imperfect harmony of, do we have Saharan dust? Do we have dry air and do we have rising air? You know, warm waters are just one piece of the puzzle. You got to factor in the other elements. So when we oftentimes have storms like Ian or Andrew, you have all of those from the checklist marked. There are times where the Gulf is piping hot, but if I have high wind shear and dry air, it doesn't matter if the water temperatures are 200 degrees, that system is not going to develop into a powerful storm. So water temperatures are just a part of hurricane formation. Next graphic. Okay, so for a show of hands, here in this beautiful room, is this your first hurricane season? With a show of hands. We had, wow. Normally when I do that in hurricane talks, like half of the hands come up. We have a few. So wind shear. Wind shear is a big element of tropical systems. And I'll show you what we don't want and what we do want. The example on the left is what we don't want. That is a low shear environment. Shear is basically winds that increase as you go up in the atmosphere. We like that, tropical systems don't. So an example of Hurricane Ian is what we have on the left. Low wind shear, the storms were allowed to consolidate near the core, and it, as a result, got powerful. What we want is the example on the right, a high wind shear environment. You see how it kind of causes the storm to tip over? That allows for not as good a vertical alignment, and that will weaken, if not shred, storms apart. So high wind shear is what we want. We don't want low wind shear. Next graphic. Who's ever heard of El Nino and La Nina? So, no offense to La Nina, we don't like her. Here's the reason why. We like El Nino during hurricane season. So in this example, and I'll explain it for those in the upper row in the back, the image on the left, El Nino is defined as warmer than normal water temperatures in the eastern Pacific. Those waters, believe it or not, have the ability to alter weather patterns across the world, and consequently, they increase wind shear. We like that high wind shear into the tropical Atlantic. That's why we like El Nino. We don't like La Nina, the example on the right, which is cooler than normal waters in the eastern Pacific, because that can lower wind shear in areas where hurricanes form. The current outlook for this hurricane season is right now a battle between neutral conditions and a La Nina. I think right now the probability for an El Nino is 10%. The other 90% is a split between either a neutral phase, where it's not either of them, or it's La Nina. So that's the current outlook for this hurricane season and what models are showing. Next graphic. You know, Matt, is there anything that can save us, any saving grace? And we do see some pretty decent rounds of what's called Saharan dust. Dry air at the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere, basically about 5,000 to 15,000 feet up, comes in from Africa, and that dry, dusty air gets sucked in from tropical systems and can hurt them depending on the time of the year. Our main Saharan dust months are June, July, the first half of August, and no surprise, once the Saharan dust levels start to lower, we see the peak of hurricane season. And the absolute peak is September 10th. And no surprise, when we've had hurricanes Donna and Irma that made landfall on the same day, it was September 10th. So that is the peak of our Atlantic hurricane season. Next graphic. So this was a look last year. We had 18 storms, 11 hurricanes, 5 major, and we had, as I had noted, 3 storm surge events. I'll be very honest with you guys, I was exhausted by November. I could not wait for winter, and when we start to have storms develop in November, I was like, all right, wrap it up, enough. And I'm sure I wasn't the only one that thought that. I'm very sensitive in my wording on TV because I could not tell you how many people picked up hurricane PTSD after Ian. I'll never forget, in 2023, I would do hurricane talks. I'd mention the word Ian, and then I would see people get emotional in the crowd. And that is my promise to you on TV. I'm a no BS, no hype type of guy, and it's for that reason. And you guys deserve that. You deserve the facts and nothing more. And that's the way that I will always be. Next graphic. I think this is crazy. This is completely true. This is a list of water levels in Naples since 1965. 5 of the highest 9 have been in the past 3 years. And you can see on the top of the list, Ian, the sensor, Dan can tell you this, it washed away and it failed, so it very well could have been higher than 6 feet. It washed away and got destroyed. And then you can see right below it is Milton, right below it is Helene. Next graphic. How storm surge works, it's basically because wind is a force and you have a lot of wind with a hurricane, it's forcing up the water. And you can see the amount in feet above the astronomical high tide. That's your storm surge, and that's where you get coastal flooding. Next graphic. So you probably have seen this graphic. It's what's called a worst case scenario inundation. 9 times out of 10, it's not going to reach those maximum levels. But as you can imagine, from the broadcast end and from the emergency management end, we would rather over-prepare you than under-prepare you. 9 times out of 10, that won't completely verify, but there's always that chance. There's always that chance it could if all the ingredients come together, and we unfortunately did see that with Ian on Fort Myers Beach. Next graphic. And that is based off of your local elevation. Here's a look at, and I'll explain this in the back, these are the Hurricane Helene surge levels. You can see Collier County, we had about 3 to 6 feet. Dan's team and the Collier County Emergency Management did an awesome job during Helene, and let me show you the next graphic with Milton, getting everybody prepared and also taken care of before, during, and after the storm. Here was a look at Milton. Had very similar surge values of about 3 to 6 feet. I'm waiting on the official report from the Hurricane Center, which should be coming out shortly with more specifics on these water levels. Next graphic. Here's a look at the highest storm surge ever in Southwest Florida since 1850. I'm a big weather history buff, and I went back all the way 200 years, and Ian is the highest in at least 200 years. 15 feet, Fort Myers Beach, followed by, there was a very infamous hurricane, 1873, 13 feet. There's Donna at 12, Irma at 10, followed by Wilma, Charlie, and others. Next graphic. One of the most important things I have to say is right now, when it comes to where a hurricane makes landfall, location is everything. I'll never forget, after Ian, I had a viewer reach out, and as you can imagine, I get good emails and I get bad emails. I had a guy in Punta Gorda, the title of the email was "You Stink," and I then read the email, and he said, "I live in Punta Gorda, and you said I was going to get 12 to 18 feet of storm surge, and I didn't. You stink." And of course, the thing I'm laughing at is, you got to keep your house. What are you complaining about? And but what that gentleman did not realize is that his location with Ian, he was in a favorable spot when it comes to surge. Let me show you that. So in this graphic, you can see the counterclockwise motion on the northern side had the wind coming in from the land. So this is Charlotte Harbor. It sucked out the water because the wind was coming in from the land. Now, where you do not want to be with a hurricane is the next graphic. You do not want to be on the southern half, because in the northern hemisphere, counterclockwise motion. So you have 150 miles an hour of wind forcing up the water. And that's why we had the surge like we did with Ian. This is the radar imagery from our Doppler at the time, making landfall across Lee County. Next graphic. And I'm sure you probably have seen this. It's a before and after of Ian. There is Fort Myers Beach near the Lani Kai. Before, look at the palm trees on the left, followed by after, and that is why, and you can see it picked up actually that building and moved it across the street. That is the raw power of storm surge and why we take it so seriously. Next graphic. For those who were here during Irma, I cannot stress enough how lucky we got. Even despite everything that we went through, there was a time where Irma was supposed to make landfall around Sanibel Captiva, and it didn't. At the last minute, it shifted 25 to 30 miles east. Remember the positioning in reference to the eye. If you're on the southern or eastern side, you're going to see that surge. So in this graphic, the hypothetical, if it made landfall on Sanibel, that image on the left, you can see the red and the yellow, that surge of anywhere between 3 to 6 feet, 6 to 9, and even 9 to 12 in the red. But thank goodness, right at the last minute, it shifted east. Now, it was not good news for Plantation Island and Everglades City. They saw every bit of that storm surge because they were on the eastern side as the wind was coming in from the Gulf. Next graphic. And same case with Ian. You can see the storm surge levels for Collier County and Lee County. The orange, 6 to 9, the red, 9 to 12, and the pink, 15 feet. Next graphic. I think I'm almost done. Let's see. Oh yeah, this is the last one. Woohoo! Good time. Okay. So how you create higher storm surge is bigger storms, stronger storms, slower storms, as well as how it approaches our coast and what angle it does that. as well as our daily tides, full moon, new moon, if all of these come together, that is what can sometimes be that hypothetical worst case scenario for storm surge. Next graphic. So that is my presentation, and once again, I just want to reaffirm that, like she said, my job, I know that sometimes when you turn on TV and during hurricane coverage, you'll get the guy standing outside, whipping around left and right, and the Weather Channel looks like they're praying for dear life. I'm not going to do that to you. I see that, and I'm like, oh, geez. So I'm a no-hype guy. You guys deserve that, and that will be my promise to you with every future storm. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Matt, and special thanks to Wink News for letting you be with us today, because you're probably not making it back for the 5 o'clock.
I'll be on at 7.
All right. So next we have our next presenter. Oh, and again, I'm supposed to tell you, if you have questions for Matt, write them down, and they'll pick them up. Our next presenter is Dr. Jennifer Jurado, Chief Resilience Officer and Deputy Director of the Resilient Environment Department in Broward County. Dr. Jurado leads climate resilience and environmental planning for Broward County, future conditions, infrastructure resilience, shoreline protection, and clean energy initiatives. She has forged key public-private partnerships contributing to major projects like C51 Reservoir, which is the first multi-jurisdictional water resource development project in South Florida, and flood risk mitigation studies. Recently, she completed the Broward County-wide Resilience Plan, securing broad support and economic benefits. A participant in the Southeast Florida Regional Climate Change Compact since 2009, and she was honored at the as a White House Champion of Change in 2012. Dr. Jurado holds a PhD in marine biology and fisheries from the University of Miami, so please join me in welcoming Dr. Jennifer.
No problem. All right, well, this is real difficult because I do not have the same voice at all or the camera present, so next time I choose a different order. But it is my pleasure to provide support for today's conversation. Very different presentation. I could talk about the technical components, perhaps not as deeply, but I'm going to bring it up and talk more about resilience planning, what it looks like across many of our communities as we're all confronted with an increase in especially flood risk, hurricane winds, and so forth too. But I'm not going to be talking so much about hurricane winds, but rather the flood component. So next slide, please. So I was asked to begin with just a little bit in the way of the overall landscape, and I'm sure it's no surprise to anyone. I mean, across the globe, we're all dealing with more intense systems. I mean, there's probably not a community that hasn't had an experience of some kind, and when we look at issues of flood, it's a whole wide range of scales. I mean, in the Netherlands, they've been planning for extreme, water conditions and surge for some time, 1 in 1,000-year storms. Yet the Thames Barrier in London, they're looking at upgrading that structure currently, planning for sea level rise. City of San Francisco a decade ago undertook a major risk initiative looking at how they could go about increasing this large seawall around the city and what would be required to do that, and as a function of sea level rise. We have the Hampton Roads area and the military bases that have been struggling with the types of inundation and exposure of community and assets, and they've got a very extensive landscape level resilience investments that they're working on, protecting infrastructure, creating space for water and storage, protecting against high tide surge and the like. Next slide, please. Boston Harbor, we're going to be heading up there in a couple of weeks to learn more about their resilience efforts. All of our communities are trying to learn as much as we can from one another, trying to accelerate the pace of planning, bring engineering and innovation to the investments that we need. And Boston's another community where they've been working on waterfront resilience for some time, protecting existing infrastructure, buffering that edge between the urban environment and the water, lots of what we call green features and living shorelines features that are part of the overall strategy, I think, moving forward these days, is creating, again, more of a buffer, but also trying to create a softer barrier to the type of environment in which we live. We're a little bit more sensitive to the resilience benefits that green infrastructure actually produce for us, as opposed to standard like seawalls. And you'll see some examples of that in a moment. Next slide, please. Some of what we do with regards to resilience is very much a function of where we live and the type of hazard that we're dealing with. And clearly you all are having a lot of conversation about storm surge. And in fact, there are estimates that you've got in the Collier County region, 6 and 9, or cities that are ranked number 6 and number 9 with regards to overall surge exposure, because you have such a broad, shallow coastal shelf that allows these storms to move in, the water volume to build up. You've got bays, inlets, water bodies that create funnels that allow that water to move further inland. And without a barrier to really break that water, you're dealing with some very significant surge. As opposed to the East Coast where I am, where we clearly worry about storm surge as well, and it's a terrible compounding factor when you're looking at flood risk. But we also have a narrower shelf, we have a break in which we move very quickly from deep water to shallow. We've got the reefs, and so we don't see the same exposure associated with the strength and impact of surge that you can have on the West Coast. Other things that create exposures: did you build on wetlands? Are we depriving our shorelines of sediment in some way? Are we subject to subsidence? What kind of geology do we have underneath us? All of those things will come into play. You have questions about the overall integrity of foundations. Lots of exploration of how much will some of the evolving climate conditions be compounded by the way that we built, where we built, and then the density and the cost of the infrastructure in the region in which we live. Next slide, please. So with some of that in mind, we're also seeing a lot happen in Southeast Florida with regards to resilience investments, and we've seen the exposure over the last 10 and 15 years, perhaps not with the same level of intensity of hurricane as of late, not that we don't have our own experience there, but very regular, impactful flooding associated with tide, yes, with storm surge, also with extreme rainfall events. And I don't know if you've had the same experience, but you probably heard, in Fort Lauderdale, we had a 26-inch rainfall event, 12 hours with 3 and 5 feet of flooding outside of hurricane season, a storm that arrived in just a matter of hours. 14 months later, we had another rainfall event with 2 feet of flooding that drowned neighborhoods. And then just a couple months after that, also in the winter month, we had another major flood event on Broward Boulevard just this last year. So we've had 3 major flood events outside any tropical storm in less than 2 years, in addition to the major intense storms that are occurring every 3 years or thereabout as well. So we have projects taking place. Here's one. I want you to actually go back a slide, please. Jose Marti Park. This is in the city of Miami. It's a major green infrastructure project looking, again, how can you create space along your waterfront, create storage opportunities for water, help buffer the impacts between your waterway, your urban environment, still have this be a public place. This reflects a design standard called Waterfront Edge Design Guidelines. It is a prudent guideline to use when you have development on the waterfront, and I think you'll hear more and more about this making its way into its investments down here. We see it up in New York, Boston area as well. Next slide, please. We have another area of advancement is simply raising infrastructure. This was happening out of necessity initially, not out of wise planning, but simply you have your stormwater pumps that are needed for a flood, underwater generators not working, can't move the water. You had major roadways into Miami Beach, couldn't move a vehicle at high tide, and this would be reliably the condition for days a week every month in the summer or in the fall. Raising of seawalls. This was happening in the course of a development project, and tractors are sitting in water as high tide flooding was coming up. So these things were all happening sporadically. Next slide, please. We've also seen more in the way of shoreline protection. Broward County ourselves, we've adopted a goal of having 80% dune presence across all of our beaches as a resilience measure. Prior to Tropical Storm Sandy, we couldn't get a dune built for the life of us. The community was so opposed because it would obstruct views. Today, it's built into every one of our beach projects. We won't build a beach unless we're able to put the dune in place. We also have more happening in the way of innovative design features, such as the sea height features that were designed by the University of Miami here, are being produced by a company called OnePrint. We've got cool concrete, low carbon concrete, all kinds of reef modules that are starting to be deployed and being tested for their habitat value and their ability to reduce wave energy and provide shoreline protection. Next slide, please. We also have, I want to provide here an event that occurred that is now probably our first example of really pulling back from the shoreline. And this was following Tropical Storm Sandy, where we didn't have a direct impact, but we had a lot of beach erosion. A month later, during, I think it was the Thanksgiving season, we had a mild onshore wind, but coupled with extreme high tide, and saw more than 1,000 feet of A1A collapse. With that particular event in Fort Lauderdale, we reduced the lanes of traffic to 1 lane in each direction. We removed parking, we pulled the road back. We put in 30 feet of sheet piling to stabilize the infrastructure should it happen again, built back the beach, and put a dune in place. So that was a major resilience investment, probably the first of that scale that we began to see take place, because the magnitude of the cost is like 50 times more expensive per foot to build back this system as opposed to just keep sand in the beach in the first place. So we really need to ensure shoreline stabilization. Next slide, please. And then also investments in stormwater management systems, basically one-way valves on storm pipes so you don't have backflow of water into communities. But the picture on the right is a good one. This is from the community of Oakland Park, where they lived on a waterway, would see a lot of propagation of storm surge up the river and into the canal network, with a lot of flooding, repeat flooding into these back homes. What they did was get a FEMA grant, put a storm surge barrier on the waterway, coupled it with a pump, so you can stop the wave propagation. You can actively pump water when the water levels are otherwise so high that you wouldn't be able to drain, and they created a wetland on the back area, so green infrastructure buffer coupled with a hard infrastructure project. Next slide, please. So those are the one-off projects, but we also knew we needed to be much more strategic and deliberative in terms of thinking about how we plan for infrastructure, and we began to build future condition requirements into every aspect of design and permitting for infrastructure in our community. We did a lot of modeling. We accounted for the rise of sea level in land use maps, where we look at every land use decision under the lens of sea level rise. We updated the requirements for drainage and water management systems to account for 3 feet of sea level rise and how it affects our groundwater table. Today, every project has to be designed in accordance with that new future conditions map. It carries planning conditions through the year 2070. We've updated requirements for seawalls. We have a minimum requirement. I won't get into the details of what it is, but it accounts for 2 feet of sea level rise, it accounts for storm surge, it accounts for king tide, and it ensures flood protection through 2050 under the conditions that I've described. And we created a future conditions 100-year flood map that exceeds FEMA requirements, accounting for rainfall intensification for a 100-year storm, king tides, sea level rise, and groundwater table levels. And so now we build higher than those conditions. We stay ahead of what FEMA's modeling, we get discounts on our flood insurance, and we avoid the flood losses. Next slide, please. A lot of that took place through good work and collaboration, but was also strongly supported by our business community. And I want to acknowledge that that was a difficult conversation perhaps to get started, but when we started seeing regular impacts, it was undeniable we had to talk about economics and the cost of inaction opposed to building for resilience. We now work every year, major convenings like this, with our municipal leadership, our county leadership, our business leadership, talk about what's happening for resilience planning, what we've done, where we need to go. We've built support for all the initiatives I just referenced, as well as support for a countywide resilience plan, which we were working on for the last 2 years. Next slide, please. This plan was developed by the scope of work that the business community asked for. They said, give us a plan with metrics, show us what it does for flood protection, but show us what it does for economic return, and that'll be a plan that we'll be able to vote for or support and fund. So we undertook that charge, we undertook the work. Next slide, please. We conducted an extensive amount of modeling, 81 different combined, we call it compound flooding, all those scenarios I talked about in different conditions, modeled with storm surge, up to 100-year storm surge, 3 feet sea level rise, rainfall intensification, etc. Next slide, please. We built that into an adaptation plan that looked at all types of infrastructure that could be deployed to address the flood risk. So this is surface water storage, underground storage, changing our canals, more pumps, improved culverts, building up our seawalls, and a collective of investments across all of Broward County. And there's a summary of some of that on that right panel. Next slide, please. We also showed the performance. In this particular slide, we're looking on the left of the areas of flooding with 2 feet of sea level rise, 100-year rain event, and 100-year storm surge. And then we put the measures into place and look at the flood reduction. We were able to pull 67% of the properties that otherwise would have had been intruded with flood water. We're able to pull out of those conditions. And we know that storm surge, again, was one of the real compounding factors. And in some cases, we have to invest in additional seawall up to 7 feet NAVD, which is, again, it's a standard. But we're expecting with time we're going to have to up that seawall investment because of the challenge that storm surge presents. But the goal isn't everything's dry all the time under all conditions. The goal is keep as much as we can dry and limit the flooding expanse duration and the damage that's associated with that. And there will always be certain conditions where you're just going to have to evacuate, and there will be some exposures. Next slide, please. Here's an example just of the types of things that are modeled in that system when we talk about green infrastructure and storage. And I did want to say that there's a bill making its way through the legislature this session focused on green infrastructure and working to develop rules and standards that will help get more of this type of infrastructure permitted, especially in the coastal environment. And that'll be really key to being able to move more quickly on these types of investments. Next slide, please. We've created a visual tool that allows the community to look at their neighborhood under the types of conditions that we've modeled. We've got virtual renderings of the flood conditions within action and with action, and will help build support, presumably, for the value of the investments as we're really able to look at the localized opportunities. Next slide, please. But that really moves us over into what do you do with all these things. We're embedding it more so into our land use and our planning. We're looking at a next map that's going to be the assignment of additional water storage through the redevelopment process. The business community is prepared for this, and they've talked about being able to relax their own tolerance for regulation. We're going to have to do more with every dollar that's being expended in the community. Next slide, please. We've translated the results to economic outcomes. We're looking at being able to avoid, on annual average, $4 billion in the way of residential flood damage. That's by accounting for low-risk, high-impact events and low-frequency, high-impact, and high-frequency, low-impact. So avoiding $4 billion a year in annual exposure, preserving $30 billion in residential real estate value, preserving $20 billion in flood insurance coverage and maintaining that affordability, and $1 billion in ad valorem tax revenues that are actually needed for the rest of the services. So these are the types of economic outcomes that we're talking about. Next slide, please. And then finally, the cost. We did conduct planning level cost estimates. It's a $30 billion investment to deliver the resilience that we modeled. But we estimate about 2/3 of that cost will happen through natural redevelopment, investment that happens through our properties and at homes. So some of that's private, yep. The same way of a lot of our infrastructure that has been developed that we have today. But we also estimate an additional nearly $10 billion will need to come from the public sector. And we're starting to have the conversation about how will that work. Most of the cost is seawalls and storage, surface water storage, and the other projects are not as costly as those first two components. Next slide, please. And finally, I'm concluding. I know time is short, but I want to acknowledge the continued role of the business community. The business community worked with us on that plan. They endorsed it up front. They participated throughout. We have economic resilience work groups at the regional level, at the Broward County level. We have our annual convenings. They support us in our annual summits. So they're very present and involved in the dialogue and supportive. And in the next slide, you'll see that they actually brought together the community of business leadership in the unveiling of the plan and asked for support. And it was a cross-section of leaders and strong endorsement for being there as we look to really delve into what's required for the next step, understanding that we've done the work, the impacts are here, they're not in 2050, they're not in 2070, and we can't afford any delays with this next step, which is critical implementation. And I've got some wrap-up slides, but I'm just going to maybe leave them on the summary for 2 seconds, and hopefully we can talk about questions that you might have a little bit later. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. We certainly all learned a lot, and maybe what we can do in Collier County, and maybe it's time to lay our plan down against your plan and see where we go from here in this county. Very extensive and very impressive. But next, and now to report on resilience efforts here in Collier County is Dan Summers, Director of Collier Emergency Management. He brings decades of experiences from his early career in New Hanover County, North Carolina, where he coordinated numerous presidential disaster declarations and established advanced EMS programs. A graduate of Thomas Edison State University and the FEMA Senior Executive Leadership Program, Dan has testified before Congress and contributed to national emergency management initiatives. Today, he leads Collier County's comprehensive preparedness, response, recovery, and mitigation efforts, managing 32 presidential declared disaster. His lifelong dedication to public safety reflects an unwavering commitment to safeguarding our community. So please welcome Dan Summers.
Good afternoon. You saw a lot of big numbers today, and let me put some of these things in perspective with my teammates here. First of all, in this disaster response and recovery, these are critical team players. The entire community, the nonprofit community, the public safety partners, and the local government, and you. We're all partners in this response and recovery. And certainly we are partners in what we call mitigation, which is our aspect of resiliency and emergency management. And we've talked about construction, we've talked about meteorology, but let me just share with you how bad this is hitting our pocketbook. And that's not to take away from the care and the compassion that we have for our fellow residents in Collier County. The Carnegie Endowment Foundation today released some pretty interesting numbers about disaster cost from 2003 to 2025. Let me rattle off just the top 5 for you. In that period of time, what has been spent in disasters by state. Puerto Rico, $58 billion. Louisiana, $46 billion. New York, $28 billion. Not to be outdone, Florida, $27 billion, and Texas, $21 billion. So guess what? We've got to do better. We cannot continue on this path of the damage repair cycle that we deal with, and we're seeing larger audiences being impacted by the need for individual and family grant needs. And again, our foundation, the Community Foundation, and our other nonprofits in Collier County have really stepped up to help those in need. I want to thank Jerry Quarles and Josh Starrett are out front with the table on my team. EM coordinators that work on financial reimbursement and volunteer agency assistance are also here. And again, our partnership with Matt and the things that we do during real-time events. Let's go to the next slide. Let's talk a little bit about our vulnerability. As if we haven't you haven't lived the vulnerability, just remember what's here from kind of a social science perspective. Increasing population, aging infrastructure, more intense storm likelihood, more wildfire interface as we build out in eastern Collier County. We, the emergency management community, are now being challenged by FEMA cuts and concurrent disasters. We've had disasters here in Collier County where our vendors had to go all the way to Oregon to recruit personnel for cleanup. We've also had to deal with the impacts of our own human capital. You know, it's one thing that if you are a county government, a city government, a first responder, and your home is also impacted. So lots of impacts there in human capital. And finally, according to USA Today, and I wonder why I don't get invited to lunch by the real estate community, which U.S. county has had the most declared disasters? Collier County. We're good. We bounce right back. It's okay. But again, the majority of that being some of the wildfire activities. Let's go to the next slide. Here's what you need to know in Collier County and what you need to know about disasters as one of your micro-learning events today. So, and that is simply this. All disasters are federally funded, state-supported, and locally executed. Now, repeat after me. All disasters are federally funded, state-supported, and locally executed. And you're part of that local execution. We've also heard a lot of challenges and a lot of kind of left hooks and right punches on FEMA. And the FEMA Overhaul Initiative, which is unfortunately a little scary, but we can always do better, so I'll leave it at that. But we do expect more of the financial load to come to the state and local level in the future. We expect more impacts and demands for more services on our nonprofit community who are helping those in need. We also suspect a reduction in the money in the post-disaster mitigation funding. Now, these things that we try to, there's a set aside by FEMA to provide certain amount of money to local government to recover from the storm and mitigate from future disasters, break the damage repair cycle. We expect less of that money, and what does that mean? We've got to do it. And finally, fiscally constrained counties are even going to be in a more tough situation. Let's go to the next slide. In my world, what I plan to do as your county emergency manager, my job is to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to prevent loss of life. These partners are also committed to that effort. We want to find those opportunities within infrastructure to, again, reduce the impact of services. We've had to have situations where we said, hey, look, stop running the washing machine immediately after the storm. Would you all stop doing laundry immediately after the storm? Okay, just give it a day. Let's get our water and sewer systems back up, an opportunity to catch up. And I am being serious about that. But we're also looking at things like we could buy more generators. We have over 1,000 lift stations in Collier County. But at what point is that the proper investment? You, as a ratepayer, can't afford for me to buy 1,000 generators and maintain them. But we have a tiered and triaged approach to that. And finally, my other job during times of disaster is to avoid waste and duplication of effort, which is why we have the county's Emergency Operations Center with 56 agencies come together, and my job is to orchestrate that response and that recovery. Next slide, please. What does resiliency mean to us? First of all, any of you had a home repair project lately and you had to pull a permit? Okay. Well, before you completely cuss out the building inspector, remember it's the building code official at the end of the day that has won the battle against the storm. Whether it is from elevation and new construction, or whether it was wind mitigation, because in Florida, the need for stronger codes or even adaptation at the local level, it's the building code official, as much as you may hate him or her some days, is the one that brought you to victory because you probably had less damage in your home here in Southwest Florida than in other places. We've talked about the evacuation concept where we want you to hide from the wind and run from the water. Matt gave you a great discussion on storm surge. A cubic yard of seawater weighs over a ton, okay? So you think about that much force, the scouring power that that ton has, then this is why in our evacuations discussions, we want you to hide from the wind and run from the water. Our shallow Gulf waters are problematic, our less protection from natural barriers, and tidal flow dependency. We all know if you were a Naples resident, we had to wait on a couple of tide cycles to get that water out. That's not going to go away, and I'm not sure that we could pump all of that out. Next slide. Part of our resiliency is our ability to do the emergency management work and to cooperate and quickly build a very large new business process. Great partnerships with the Florida Division of Emergency Management. A 37-page bill just cleared committee this morning that has got some unbelievable new challenges for local government related to emergency management readiness if it passes. Our ability to get help, our ability to do contracting, to get those disaster supplies in here and address the health, safety, welfare, communications, and commerce. I grew up in a family of small business, so I have an appreciation for the small business impacts during these storms. But our job, I'm feeding you information, I'm giving you strategy, I'm working with utilities to try to get Collier County back to pre-disaster condition just as quick as we can with minimal loss of life and property. Next slide. Everything that we work for or work under as a local government emergency manager is basically under an umbrella of FEMA guidance. The Stafford Act, all 380 some pages that tells us how we're going to respond and recover and financially address those concerns. We're good at that. We know how to do it. Other counties that have not practiced or are not invested in their EM program, again, when they get hit with a major storm, they really struggle. But what we've done, much like the resiliency efforts here, is that we've tried very hard to meet those requirements so that we can get you flood insurance discounts, so that we can not have damage to infrastructure, so that we can get state-driven flexible funding, so that we can kind of get these projects moving. Unfortunately, a lot of the post-disaster funding that we get from mitigation, and we're looking at about, from last hurricanes right now, I think Collier County has about $11 million obligation, or $11 million pot to draw projects from, okay, which is a possibility. But the rules and regs are so tight, it will take about 30 months for that to be approved by FEMA, and by that time, the cost of inflation has killed the project. Next slide, please. Some success stories in infrastructure. With over 1,000 lift stations that I've mentioned, we continue to increase the appropriate investment in generators. We also use commercial pumping trucks to keep those wastewater well storage systems where they need to be, that level. We also are investing in more elevated pump controls, and we lost a lot of pump controls during these last couple of storms from saltwater infiltration. Traffic operations, I just finished a grant project with them. We will now have 100 portable generators for intersections, okay? We want to get those intersections back on regular signals. We've had too many injuries. Unfortunately, we had a fatality last year from a dark intersection, and we're working very hard to protect those items. Finally, a Category 5 rated continuity of government center. Basically, our emergency operations center is Category 5 rated. So is our data center, and so is our 911 center. We've improved the resiliency of our public safety communications. We have over 2,800 public safety users on our radio network in order to keep them mobile and operational. How many of you subscribe to Alert Collier? Getting your mass notifications. Hey, that's pretty good. Good. A little plug for that. By the way, we're not the ones that wake you up at 2 o'clock in the morning, just for the record. Okay. That's the National Weather Service. You'll have to get used to that, and or certainly we don't mind if it's an Amber Alert. And finally, human capital. We invest in training. We know the process. We know the rules. We know the regs. And we've got a very supportive Board of County Commissioners and great partners with the municipalities that let our team go to work when we need to do it. Next slide. The good and the bad. I skipped one. Additional measures, thank you. Certainly contracting, as I mentioned, to get more contractors lined up. We've supported Everglades City with the new wastewater project. As well as our Emergency Operations Center now has a Category 5 logistics warehouse. So most of our supplies and equipment would come from the closest depot, and a very small one at that is Orlando, and after that things came from Atlanta. We're a long way away from Atlanta. So I have a nice little stockpile, thanks to partners. I have a nice little stockpile of items that I can get out to Collier County for immediate needs. Commodities, et cetera. Next slide. The good and the bad of the resiliency, as I've mentioned. All of these disasters typically are a 75%, 25% cost share. And that is also the case in some of our resiliency programs on my side of the FEMA house, okay? There are a lot of sides of the FEMA funding cycle, but on my side, typically they're 75%, 25%. Do we always have, do any jurisdictions happen to have a multi-million-dollar kitty set aside for mitigation? That's a problem. And sometimes we have it, sometimes we can take it out of operational funds, sometimes we can't. Our post-disaster mitigation cycle, as I've mentioned, over about 30-month period, only about 70% of those projects fail because of the cost of materials. It's not unusual in county government for us to take 2 years to go to bid, and we may have seen an 18 to 30% price increase in prices, which again will throw these grant resources off. And finally, all of our resilience efforts are on our radar every day, and every member of our team, municipalities, et cetera, are working to address mitigation in our emergency management world in one fashion or another. And again, it's going to take time. We didn't get to this situation overnight. It's going to take local input. It's going to take a lot of work. And in some cases, it may even take away some of the aesthetics that we're used to. But most likely, and these folks have proven it, it's going to be well worth the investment. Last slide. Check us out at collierem.org. I've got a ton of resources on there for individual and family preparedness, business preparedness, and some mitigation strategies that you can do at home. And please sign up for Alert Collier so we can make sure that we stay in touch with you. When Matt starts turning things red, I can blame that on you now, Matt. When Matt starts turning those graphics red, you know that you're going to get a call from us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks for working to your commitment to safeguard our community. And we're going to focus just for a little bit on some local projects yet before we get started with the panel. We want to show you a video featuring Dr. Carrie Schumann, Climate Resilience Advisor at the Conservancy of Southwest Florida, Natalie Harmon, Natural Resource Manager at the City of Naples, who will highlight resiliency efforts, and Chad Washburn, who's the Vice President of Conservation at the Naples Botanical Garden, who will discuss beach dune restoration projects funded with $325,000 from the Community Foundation. And again, get your questions ready. I think they have quite a few, so let's do the video and then we'll be back with questions.
Southwest Florida is no stranger to hurricanes, flooding, and rising temperatures. At the Conservancy of Southwest Florida, we're working to ensure our communities are not just prepared, but resilient.
The Conservancy has been working on sort of climate as an issue for a while, as it's sort of woven in through a lot of our other work. So we've been exploring the ways that we want to contribute to local resilience.
With stronger storms and more frequent flooding, the question isn't if we'll be affected, but when and how we choose to prepare.
One of the key ways has been working in the space around nature-based solutions. We know that ecological systems, they're really integral to our quality of life. They're also really integral to our protection from a lot of these impacts, including flooding and heat and whatnot. There are some instances where hard infrastructure makes sense, but there are a lot of trade-offs with hard infrastructure. The integrity of our dune systems for nesting, so for our sea turtle nesting, for our shorebird nesting, even impacts on water quality, the ability of beaches to do what beaches need to do in a natural setting.
Naples is leading the way, having completed a vulnerability assessment and an adaptation plan that highlights nature-based solutions.
One of the strategies in that adaptation plan does point to exploring nature-based solutions. So I think at this point, our approach would be to think about, are there opportunities in sort of our home turf to start to look at these options and start to reach out and communicate with people about what those could look like as a way to interact with a community that's been very proactive. We want to support the people who are part of this process, this adaptation process. We want to support them in their process of doing that and doing that in a balanced way. One of the things that would be great is for people to try and see if their community has been doing planning. The City of Naples is a great example where you can just do a search for City of Naples and resiliency. It goes to their webpage. You can take a look at their vulnerability assessment. You can take a look at their adaptation plan, and that'll help you understand a little bit about what our local community is facing. Wanting to see that balance where we don't lose what's really important for our quality of life and our environmentally based economy is to be asking those folks engaged in planning, to be asking your city officials, your county officials, to be really thoughtful in their planning, to be, looking at nature-based and what we call hybrid. Those are those options that look at the best of both worlds, and to be asking, can you explore what those could look like for us? Can you help us, implement those? So I think, asking for those is going to be really important.
Naples is no stranger to the power of nature. Rising sea levels, stronger storms, and extreme weather are real challenges. That's why the city is taking action.
So the city has completed an adaptation plan and vulnerability assessment. And we are in the process of working through the adaptation strategies, and this is a list of 47 strategies that will help us become more resilient to future flooding and heat concerns.
Some strategies are already in action. The city is making sure resilience is built into every new project.
So if they were in the design stage, we went ahead and made sure that resilience efforts were included in that design. And if they were in actual construction, we looked to make sure that they did adhere to resilience measures.
Naples is balancing natural solutions with smart infrastructure.
We're working closely with the Conservancy of Southwest Florida to help us develop some ideas for nature-based solutions in our area. In addition, the Army Corps of Engineers has also proposed some nature-based solutions, which we'll find out about when they complete their study for Collier County.
Collaboration is key, and residents play a big role.
We also reach out to community groups like HOAs and give updates on what we're working on now. And we try to keep everyone as informed as possible.
Naples is committed to a resilient future, but resilience takes funding, planning, and community support.
As the resilience efforts continue, we are going to need quite a bit of funding in order to make our city more resilient. Help us help you. We would really like for the residents to support those efforts. Anytime you want to reach out and get some questions answered or just have a conversation, feel free to reach out to me and we can have a conversation.
Together, we can build a stronger and more resilient Naples. Collier County's beaches, more than just a scenic destination, they are a crucial barrier protecting our homes, businesses, and infrastructure from the power of the sea.
So the beach dunes really are our first line of defense against hurricanes. And they provide that protection when we get high winds and high wave energy.
But recent storms have devastated our coastline.
But we've had several significant storms over the last few years that have really eroded our beaches, and they've impacted the ecosystem that builds those dunes. And with those gone, we really can't trap and keep sand in place that builds that natural protective barrier.
That's why this project is so vital. Restoring 13 miles of coastline with 1 million native plants to rebuild our dunes and protect our future.
So really the goal was to restore that ecosystem. So it's an environmental project, but it also impacts the community. It impacts economics, because beaches really are the economic engine of our community.
Dunes are more than just sand and sea oats. A thriving, resilient dune ecosystem depends on biodiversity.
Some of the other species, like the sea oats, they're the core of the ecosystem. We didn't find those plants planted out in restoration projects, and we quickly realized that as a botanical garden, we conserve plants. We also conserve ecosystems. And here we have one of our most important ecosystems. It's our protective barrier. It holds sand in place for the beaches, which are our economic engine, and it needed restored. But we need all of those other species that are part of that web to be there to ensure that the beach dunes are healthy and resilient. They cannot recover as quickly if we do not have all of the biodiversity that they need to be a functioning ecosystem.
A resilient coastline starts with all of us. Every plant, every action, every effort helps protect our beaches for future generations.
This beach dune restoration project is just the beginning. As our community really continues to invest in protecting our beaches, protecting our tourism industry, we're working with the city and the county to improve management practices on the beach. This planting is the first planting, and it will take time for it to grow in. We really need that support from the entire community to ensure that we do this appropriately. The other thing that people can do is, when you come out on the beach, don't put your beach chairs in the dunes and don't walk in the dunes. Really, we want to keep just that impact can have long-lasting impacts on the plants that are there. So we really want to make sure that people respect the plants and please keep off of the dunes to ensure that we can have these healthy, protective ecosystems.
By working together, we can restore our dunes and secure the future of Collier County, one plant at a time.
And hopefully we can get at some of them. First question was, will the presentations be online? Yes, I believe the Community Foundation will have it, as well as GNL. I'm not sure about the church, but you can try one of these. Okay, Matt, you're up. So here's the question. Will the NOAA cuts affect the ability for you to forecast, or how does it affect Collier County?
Okay, so obviously this is complex. Doesn't help, that's for sure. And here's why. There are multiple layers to it. I'll give you some examples. First off, Who's ever seen those weather balloons? The weather balloons, we launch them every day, multiple cities. Those weather balloons, they go up high in the atmosphere. They analyze temperature, dew point, wind. Well, that data goes into our computer models. If you have less weather balloons, hypothetically, you would have a less accurate forecast to a certain degree. We also, who's ever seen, and I'm sure pretty much everybody has, those spaghetti models that we show on TV. One of the new age computer models that I used last year and I've used since 2023, it's called it's a brand new hurricane model called HAFS. One of the gentlemen that was part of developing that hurricane model was laid off. I wish, he's not a person that we need to lay off. He's brilliant, he's great at tropical weather. I've also seen delays in getting Doppler radars repaired recently. And the big thing, I'll just be quite frank with you, is Dan has done a great job in getting tide sensors and also keeping up with the Naples base sensor, but I have a huge void in Charlotte County. We don't have any. So when we were having a storm surge event with Helene and Milton, I'm flying blind because I don't have a tide sensor to see if are the water levels going up or down. I contacted Rick Scott and Byron Donalds, and we actually had that process flowing with NOAA a few months ago before the cuts. Now, do I think that we're going to put that in? I don't know, but we need it. So that's just a few of the examples, and I could go on and give you more details, but in a nutshell, it doesn't help us. I talked to the National Weather Service on Friday. They are overworked, understaffed, and they need help, and it's not what they needed.
We're paying very close attention.
Is that on,
We're-
Dan?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're paying very close attention to the fact we learned today that our wildfire meteorology, which is a secondary subspecialty, if you will, that gives us our forecasting for first responders during wildfire interface, we've been told that has been dramatically cut. So we don't know what our wildfire weather resources are going to be going into the spring fire season.
Thanks. So Jennifer, did you consider property insurance when you did your plan?
Our consideration of property insurance was limited to the flood. We didn't
Just
look
flood
at,
insurance?
we did not look at windstorm.
Okay. And then Dan, how do you work with the city of Naples and the initiatives that they're doing? And just kind of in general, when it's going to hit our county, I know county emergency management kind of takes the lead. How does that all work together?
Well, again, I can't stress enough the partnership. So yes, the city of Naples will do their operations to the extent that they can manage, that they can support with the resources they have, whether it's staff or contract. And then if they run into difficult times, their next step is to contact the Collier EOC. They have a representative there. Then we will try to broker whatever resource that they may need, whether it is a contract, whether it is something they need to borrow from the county, or if it's a state resource. My job is to filter or triage the need for state or federal support. So if I need something, let's say I need 15 highway patrolmen to help support the city of Naples, that request comes to me, I validate that request, it goes to the State Emergency Operations Center, and the state fulfills that mission at the state expense. If the state can't meet that particular resource request, then they turn to FEMA, who again can tap any federal agency to support. So that's just one of the mechanisms of the partnership.
That's great. Matt, what do you think? Are we going to have a Helene and a Milton every single year? Can we leave here and feel good and calm? Can we feel calm?
The funny thing, and by the way, I'm having a kid in early June. It better be a quiet season. I already got one, and he's a handful. Thank you, I appreciate it. Everybody always asks me that question and I'll be honest with you, I don't know. I don't know what this season's going to be. But I think the mistake that we make is we focus so much on the numbers. 10 storms this year, 20 storms, 30. Takes one. to make all the difference. Classic example I always give in my hurricane talks is 1992. 1992, we had 7 storms. We had 1 major hurricane. Guess who the major hurricane was? It was Andrew. So, and I've had other years like 2010. 2010 verified as an above average year. We had 19 storms, most of them curved out to sea, and you didn't even know that we had an above average year. So in theory, with our water temperatures, with a neutral to La Nina phase, it should be close to average, if not above average by several storms, kind of within that range. I don't have any guidance right now that's showing a crazy hyperactive 30 storm season, but it's also March, so we'll see.
So Jennifer, the administration stance on FEMA, how will that affect your project, or how will funding affect your project, just like NOAA for weather?
Yeah, we're evaluating, when you look at the longer term investment needs, FEMA is a critical partner in all aspects of pre and post hazard mitigation. But we are looking at strategies, and if we assume a 25% external funding to 75% external funding, and you look at, could you use ad valorem or surtax funding, how do you come up with $10 billion? First, you need local money to be able to leverage, but what are you leveraging against? And if those funds are not available, you're just doing less. I mean, you can't fabricate the money. And it's critical, again, because of the cost escalation. We can't afford, 4 and 5 years waiting for the funding environment to improve. So I hope that we continue to see those investments made, but of course it's uncertain.
Dan, do you use volunteers? And if anyone in this audience wanted to volunteer to help you, how would they go about doing that?
Well, we absolutely need volunteers, and we need it at different levels. Number one, just being a good neighbor goes a long, long way to help out a neighbor in need. That's job one. Secondly, it's your affiliation with some of our national organizations, such as Red Cross, Salvation Army, Catholic Social Ministries. We have a lot of church groups that have a national disaster engagement. You can participate with those national groups as well. So again, please, we ask you to, be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And if I had to stay home during one of these storm events, number one, I'd drive my wife nuts. And secondly, I can only take, and I've worked with Jim Cantore, so I can say this, I can only take so much of Jim Cantore per day. And so I would much rather use that time to be productive. So help your neighbor or participate. And last but not least, through the philanthropic efforts, through the Community Foundation, throw a little check that way. That money is so well managed locally, as I kind of say, it does so much better than county government does it or city government does it. So, you can help out your neighbor that way as well.
Quick thing, bro. To reinforce what he said, an example is, and he's right on the money, help your neighbors. And I experienced that during Ian. I was slammed in the office. I couldn't even get home to put up my own shutters at my house for my wife, and she's pregnant at the time. So I had, believe it or not, I had a local church came by and put up my own shutters on my house. So help each other out. We're all in it together.
Let me just say that the Community Foundation will activate the Collier Comes Together Fund in the event there's a hurricane or a disaster. Use that fund. The worst thing that can happen is you send your checks to some GoFundMe, thing that goes up and it's gone. And there's a lot of fraud that pops up, which Dan and I and the county have worked on, because the very first hurricane, somebody took a private foundation in Sarasota, just changed it to Collier County and said they were going to be there for the farm workers in Immokalee, and we were able to shut it down within 24 hours. But how much money they got, I don't have any idea. This time around with Ian, Dan's staff were on it. They're calling me, I think within a day or two of Ian, saying, all right, we know we got one fake one up. So, just know who you're giving money to, but that wasn't really part of the plan here. Okay, I'm going to have one more question, because I got to ask Matt this. The UK and the European model versus the American model? Want to touch on that?
I get that a lot. Okay. So what's the difference and why do we show it? Statistically, the European model is the most accurate, it's the most correct. And they even have, as part of the Euro model, they also have an AI model that has just come out over the past year or two, and I used it last year. Pretty good. It's pretty good. But here's what I have to say. Do I have any retired teachers in here? Okay, so here's how you think about it. The European model is like a B+ student. The American model is like a B- student. So it's a little more accurate, but even that B+ student can get some occasional C's and D's. And I've seen the European model absolutely miss it sometimes. So we can't always say, just use the Euro model, that's it. You need to come up with a blend of all the various models, and that way you can get a better idea, not putting all your weight in one, but statistically, it is the most accurate, but not always right.
Here, I'm going to use that. Because we know that, particularly the three of you are probably very well prepared for hurricanes. There's probably nothing you need in your hurricane little kit at home. So we put a few things together for you. You'll each get one of these. And we want you to be prepared, first putting on your floaties. And there are two. Well, that one just isn't blowing up.
I have to roll up my sleeve for that one.
Then we have the umbrella hat, just in case you're going out in the rain.
I'll demonstrate.
Yep. And then we have, you know, the basic, have to have a little mug with a little flashlight because you got to have that. And then we have the very important thing, and that is the hurricane survival wine that you can get yourself to, and you get to drink it out of a G&L glass. Yes? And then you have the Collier County Post-its for making all your little notes to family, friends, and whoever else while you're sitting home drinking your wine with your floaties. And the very last thing, because why wouldn't you have chocolate to go with your wine? So there you go. You guys are set for your hurricanes. I want to thank you so much. It was amazing, all of your projects, and we're excited. We're going to take a serious look at Broward and see how that benches with Collier and how we can make that work. And thank you, Matt. We'll be watching you through the hurricane season.
So we weren't going to let you get away. So Eileen's a little different. She has hurricane survival bourbon. You have walkie-talkies to get a hold of your staff.
Oh, walkie-talkies to get my staff. That is excellent.
And Wisconsin cheese.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. And we hope it was helpful. In your programs, we do have all the legislative, nonprofit tables on your way out, but in your program you have all of your local elected officials. You can contact them. You know, we have to come together as a community to make any of the things happen like Jennifer's doing in Broward. So thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.